event is sponsored by what is known as the 1916 Committee. We formed 5-6 years ago in preparation for the 100th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Rising, and we've maintained a series of educational lectures pretty much every month throughout the year right here at the Cayley Club, and that's what we'll be doing tonight. But before I introduce our first speaker, it's incumbent on us that we talk briefly about Brexit, which has been on around our necks since 2016, when the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, and it presents great danger for Ireland, particularly the 6 counties of the north of Ireland. And as of this afternoon, when I left the house, it could have changed in the last hour or so, but a deal has been reached, but it has to be approved. An extension has to be granted by the EU. An election has to be approved by Parliament, and it will be held on December 12th. All these decisions are supposed to be made in the next 3 days. But we, again, have to say we have no idea what's going to happen over there in London, in Brussels. But we have continued the 1916 Committee to lobby politicians, and the purpose of that is to see that the Good Friday Agreement, signed in 1998 by the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union, remains in effect once the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. The United Kingdom has a vested interest in dissolving the Good Friday Agreement. Such an event would be catastrophic on the island of Ireland. Going back historically, when Brexit was voted in, and the United Kingdom and the European Union started having meetings in March of 2017, that's a long time ago, they were supposed to resolve 3 issues in the first month. The first was how much the EU was going to pay, how much the UK was going to pay the EU for the right of leaving, and it was £45 billion or something, and they agreed to it. The other thing that they were supposed to resolve was the status of citizens of the EU who are living in the UK and the status of UK citizens living in the EU, and that was resolved very principally and very easily. The third thing they were supposed to resolve was what was going to be the situation with the border in Ireland. That was March 2017. It's October 2019. They still haven't resolved it. And they can resolve it a number of different ways, none of which will probably be good for Ireland. We are just trying to emphasize that everyone pay attention to what's going on and keep in mind that the British have never treated the Irish as equal partners, and they're certainly not doing it today. And the reintroduction of a hard border on the island will create tragedy that we saw earlier in the end of last century. So it's a hard thing to do, to talk to politicians, but the American politicians had a lot to do with the Good Friday Agreement, and we want to keep pressure on that. So that's an update there. Now we're going to have 3 mini lectures tonight, which should be very interesting, on 3 different women. And our first presenter is Sarah Benz, who comes to us as the state historian of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Ancient Order of Hibernians. She is also the secretary right here at the Cayley Club. Without her, the whole place could fall down. And she's a hard-working librarian, and I think you might find out why sometimes it's not the best thing to be. Sarah.
Thanks. Before I start, there's a few people I would like to thank. Marilyn Madigan, who is on the national board of the Ladies AOH. A few years ago, she had emailed me asking me for information on Ellen Ryan Jolly for a newsletter she was writing. So I sent some information to her. But before that, I had to email Kate Wells at the Providence Public Library, Paul Martin at the Pawtucket Public Library, and Father Heyman, who is the diocesan historian, who obliged and sent me information. And lastly, I would like to thank my sister for volunteering me. Well, I believe that Ellen Ryan Jolly was a remarkable woman for her time. She was the first Rhode Islander to become national president of the Ladies Auxiliary to the Ancient Order of Hibernians, which is now known as the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians. Why I believe she was remarkable in what she accomplished during her life. I don't consider her a professional or a full-time historian, but her work was great. Amazing what she had done. She's probably best known for her work on the Nuns of the Battlefield, the monument in Washington, D.C., and a subsequent book that she published on her research. Well, brief background. She was born in Boston, and I'm figuring since she died in 1938 at the age of 85, that she was born in 1853. After the death of her father when she was a young girl, her mother moved the family to Pawtucket. She went to school, and after she graduated, she was a teacher, teaching in parochial schools around the state. After her marriage to John Jolly, she worked with him in a millinery business in various locations in Pawtucket. I found that interesting. When I was first researching her, I saw the picture in academic garb, so I thought she was an academic, and saw her in the millinery business, and that can't be her. And I found out, yes, it was her. But there was a number of firsts. She was the first Catholic woman to serve on the Pawtucket Schools Committee, and she was the first woman to receive an honorary doctorate from Notre Dame University in 1918. In looking at her life in the articles I read, I noticed important elements in her life: education, history, a love for Ireland, and her faith. Being a teacher, was obvious that education was important to her. During the 1906 National Convention of the AOH, she proposed to have Irish history taught in schools. The Pawtucket Times of July 25, 1906 states that her reasoning was, quote, hopes to see the day when children of Irish parents in America will be as conversant with the history of their own race as with that of any European race, close quote. To foster an interest in Irish history in children, she initiated the Irish essay writing contest with the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians while she was president. And I do have the flyer because it's still ongoing. So if anyone's interested. Besides the Pawtucket School Committee, she was on the board of directors of Trinity College in Washington, D.C., an institution which has close ties to the Ladies AOH. In her later years, she traveled about the country presenting papers. Her love of Ireland was notable, as was her desire for Irish freedom. According to an article in the Pawtucket Times from July 7, 1911, she was invited to Ireland by the Gaelic League. The headline reads, Mrs. Jolly invited to visit Ireland. Gaelic League asked her to attend Oireachtas, but will send paper. The article states, quote, Mrs. Jolly will not find it convenient to be present, but will contribute an article on the Gaelic sentiment in educational institutions in America. And one of the signatures on the invitation was Douglas Hyde. When I read that, I was like, wow. And the past national historian Marilyn Madigan wrote a series of newsletters during her time in office, which coincided with the 1916 centenary. One of those newsletters featured Ellen Ryan Jolly. In the newsletter, she quoted Ellen from the May 1950 National Hibernian, which is a newspaper published by the Hibernians. She wrote, quote, the dream of Hibernians of early days may be realized. They dreamed and hoped for an independent Ireland. She continued with the fact that Ellen Ryan Jolly was a friend of O'Donovan Rossa. She was the only female honorary pallbearer at his funeral. And again, a quote from the National Hibernian on the funeral. For tears of which she was not ashamed, the national president stood beside the remains of the incomparable Irish rebel, and with one hand clasped upon his dead hand and the other upon his noble brow, pledged anew in her own name and in the name of every member of the Ladies Auxiliary eternal devotion to Ireland and Ireland's noble cause. According to Marilyn's newsletter, Ellen Ryan Jolly spoke at rallies in support of men and women who took part in the 1916 Rising, being the only woman speaker. There was a resolution during the Rhode Island State Convention of the Ladies Auxiliary in 1916 in strong terms condemning Great Britain and praising Roger Casement. And this is the resolution. We had photocopied from that book. Resolved that we hail Sir Roger Casement as a modern Wolfetown and commend his heroic sacrifice of life on behalf of an unmutilated Ireland, that by his magnanimous and unswerving fidelity to Ireland's aspirations of nationhood, he incurred a felon's death. That as the exiled daughters of the island of saints and scholars protest against the manifest intention of the present British government to annihilate the entire galaxy of our learned and intelligent leaders in the persistent fight for freedom. On the martyrdom of Patrick Pearse and his colleagues in the educational world, of Francis Sheehy Skeffington in the realm of letters, and of Roger Casement, the diplomat and statesman, Ireland was bereft of her splendid intellectual support and stay. Whereas the great momentous Irish question of the moment is the political autonomy of Ireland, resolved that this convention make it one of its strongest reasons for assembling the determination to support our kith and kin at home in Ireland, to bring about an absolute separation of Ireland from the hateful and disgraceful union with Great Britain. So in reading that, I kind of like, I think she wrote that. It sounded like other things she had written. And for the National Convention of 1916, she was able to secure the Irish flag from O'Donovan Ross's widow to use. She also had a replica of Robert Emmet's death mask, according to the article printed in the Pawtucket Times of July 6, 1916. The sculptor of this replica mask was Jerome Connor. She, as past president, and Mary McWhorter of Chicago, who was the national president at the time, spoke before Congress in December of 1918 during a hearing in support of House Resolution 357, the Irish Question. That was when Congress was debating whether to recognize Ireland as an independent state. As mentioned before, she is best known for the Nuns of the Battlefield. Two pictures are two different views of the one on the left is, oh, you're right, Mila, is the two national historians, Sandra Swift and Mike McCormick, and the other one is a close-up. So she proposed a monument to the nursing sisters who cared for the wounded during the Civil War at the National Convention of 1914. Believed that this is a testament to her faith. She wanted to honor the sisters who nursed soldiers during the time of war and had gone without any official recognition. This was probably due to anti-Catholic feelings during that time. In the author's note to her book, she writes of her proposal at the convention and her subsequent dealings with the War Department. She was required to submit proof that the sisters did indeed serve the soldiers. She traveled about to gather the proof, and it was debated before Congress. With the help and support of Congressman Ambrose Kennedy of Rhode Island, the resolution was passed in 1918 in March. The sculptor was Jerome Connor. The monument, as you see, shows two figures on either side, Angel of Patriotism and the Angel of Peace, and there are 12 figures representing the 12 Order of Nuns who ministered to the sick and dying soldiers. The monument was eventually dedicated in September 1924, a full year, 10 years after she proposed it. I find it ironic when I was looking up information on it on Rhode Island Avenue in D.C.
Oh.
The book based on her research was published by the Providence Visitor Press in 1927, and I do have a copy of it somewhere. It's in another first. She was the first Rhode Island woman to be awarded the Papal Cross by Pius XI in January 1930. This was in recognition of her work on the Nuns of the Battlefield. And the picture was, the first picture was her in her academic gear. She wore that to receive her citation. Previously mentioned, she was the president of the Ladies Auxiliary of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, which is now, we're celebrating our 125th anniversary. She was the first woman from Rhode Island. The second woman was Mary King from Newport. She served from 1968 to 1970. And the third was Mary Bradley McGenery, who served from 1988 to 1990. I found an article in the journal when Mary was elected president. There was a headline that said, she campaigned to remove auxiliary from the name. So since 1984, we're known as the Ladies Ancient Order of Hibernians. Because as Mary said, women shouldn't be auxiliary to anyone. But we're celebrating our 125th anniversary. And this is can't say it very well, it's a list of all the people who served as president. The first elected president was Anna Malia from Pennsylvania, and she was elected in 1906. The years before that, they were appointed by the Men's National Board. So, any questions or?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Nice job. Her reference to her sister in the beginning is another lesson that Sarah was working when we had the meeting, and her sister volunteered her for the speech tonight. Did your job. Don't miss a meeting. Next, we're going to have a guy from Pawtucket, grew up in Pawtucket. Pat Brady has been a member of the 1916 committee here right from Jump Street, and he's contributed an awful lot to this organization. He's given several lectures here, a stunning one time with him and his daughter. Pat's a retired electrician. He's interested in Irish history, and he's interested in labor history, and tonight his topic melds the two of those together because he's going to speak about Mother Jones.
Is that Mother Jones? That picture?
Yeah.
Good evening, and thanks for coming. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mother Jones. Since 2012, volunteers have put on a Mother Jones Festival every August in the city of Cork, celebrating and honoring her legacy and declaring August 1st to be Mother Jones Day. That's the flyer. I have, for later on, I have about 25 of these that you might want to take a look at. This is the flyer for the 2019 festival in Cork. You can get them going back to 2012. On the bottom it says, a festival and summer school dedicated to the memory of Mary Harris, Mother Jones, and to the inspirational people everywhere who fight for social justice. So that's who she is. But I'm going to wait till after Marie gives her talk, because believe it or not, I used to be a school teacher for over 10 years. And when you teach, you learn. And one of the things I learned is you never hand out something that people can read while you're lecturing.
That's exactly right.
So I'll make sure you grab one of these on the way out the door. The Cork City Council erected a plaque near where she was born as Mary Harris in 1837 in the Shandon section of the city, thus recognizing her legendary role as a member of the Irish diaspora who had fought tirelessly to end child labor and to defend workers' rights in America. And that's the plaque, and I know it's a little bit hard to read. And what it says is, Mary Harris, known as Mother Jones, campaigner for workers' rights, opponent of child labor, champion of the American mine worker, was born on the north side of Cork and baptized at the nearby North Cathedral on the 1st of August in 1837. And then in quotes it says, pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Although famous in other parts of the world, especially in the United States, where she was once labeled the most dangerous woman in America, Cork-born Mother Jones was unknown and unrecognized in her native city. But the festivals and the activities involved with them have changed all that. And can I get that one there? I was over in Cork 3 or 4 years ago with my daughter, and we walked by this park, and I was amazed. It was Mother Jones Park. And it's hard to read, but the writing on the right-hand side of that says, symbolic reclaiming and renaming of this park as Mother Jones Park in recognition of the role of women in the diverse tapestry of this city's social community and political life, and to highlight the shameful underrepresentation of women in the naming of public streets, public parks, public bridges, and important public buildings. So she got her due at last. Her parents were Ellen Carter, a native of Inchigeelagh, and Richard Harris from Cork City. Landed peasantry banded together in the middle years of 19th century Ireland, reacting to the mounting burdens borne on the shoulders of the poor tenant farmers. In Cork, and in communities like her throughout Ireland, secret societies with names like the Rockites, the Terryolts, the Threshers, and the White Boys formed to carry out acts of violence against the propertied elite. They became a rural, faceless insurgency, guerrilla armies that exacted revenge upon those they felt were stealing the very soil, the very soul of Ireland from beneath them. Mary Harris's family fit into this ideology quite nicely. They didn't view the actions of middle-class reformers jockeying for position in the British Parliament as a solution to Ireland's plight. As clandestine late-night raids targeting livestock and the property of landlords became more and more commonplace, Mary's grandfather became a willing participant. And although there's no record, there's no record of the Harrises ever being evicted, many of their tenant friends were thrown off the land that they had tilled but had never owned, becoming homeless and hungry in the process, and with few choices left, save emigration. They lived day to day and hand to mouth, battered about by the whims of nature and the free market dogma of the ruling English. Her grandfather was arrested and hanged when Mary was but 2 years old. Her dad, Richard Harris, also became wanted by the law for his involvement with the secret societies. When Mary was 10 years old in 1847, as the hunger smothered the life out of the country, she and her mother were forced to look on as soldiers pulled their cottage apart, searching for her father. Somehow Richard managed to escape, and he, along with the son, made their way across the Atlantic to Canada, with Mary and her mom following them 5 years later. The trauma of her early childhood, her grandfather hanged, her father forced to flee while soldiers ransacked her home in search of him, deeply influenced how Mary viewed resistance and how she viewed power. She had witnessed firsthand what the state can bring to bear upon those it perceived as threats. The British Relief Administrator presiding over the Irish genocide during those hunger years was Charles Trevelyan. He complained that, it's a quote, "It's a horrible thing that we have to break up families, but the people we're taking in from out of the country aren't people at all. They're animals." Whoops. Wait a minute. Sorry about that. That wasn't Charles Trevelyan. That was the current president of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Sometimes I get confused. What Trevelyan said was, the greatest evil which we have to contend with is not the physical evil of the famine, but the moral evil of the selfish and perverse Irish people. The Harris family reunited in Toronto, where Mary learned the art of dressmaking. before getting accepted into a college that specialized in the training of school teachers. But it was all but impossible for a Catholic to get a teaching job in Toronto, and things weren't much better in America either. In cities with large Irish Catholic populations, the Native Know-Nothing movement was able to establish anti-Catholicism into public school curricula, which, by the way, was the principal reason for the formation of the separate Catholic school system in this country and also in Canada. So unable to find work as a teacher, Mary Harris opened up a dressmaking shop in Chicago in the late 1850s, but it failed. And she moved down to Memphis, Tennessee, just as the Civil War was starting. There she taught school and also met her husband, George Jones, an iron worker, active in the National Union of Iron Molders, and they were married 2 years later. She gave birth to 3 children, and all of them were still under the age of 5 by the war's end. But it was at this time that Mary faced her own personal perfect storm. She gave birth to her 4th child, who was named Mary also, in 1867, about the same time that the yellow fever epidemic that had already swept through the Deep South arrived on Memphis's doorstep. Before the year was through, Mary Harris would bury 5-year-old Catherine, 4-year-old Elizabeth, 2-year-old Terrence, her new baby Mary, and two weeks later, her husband George. No one dared to even venture into her home to comfort her for fear of contracting the killer disease. She lay awake at night listening to the sounds of carts as they moved through the stricken streets, collecting the bodies of the dead. Eventually, the city would allow her to tend to the sick and the dying, as she jeopardized her own health to comfort those less fortunate. But Memphis held the graves of her kids and her husband, and she had to move on. Returning to Chicago to partner with another woman and open up a dressmaking business. And it was in Chicago that Mary developed her keen awareness of the injustice of the fledgling Gilded Age. She sold her dresses for the filthy rich that lived in the splendor along Lakeshore Drive on Lake Michigan, but she witnessed from her shop's windows in the winter, quote, the poor shivering wretches, jobless and hungry, walking along the frozen lakefront. And in the summer she saw similar unfortunates escaping the oppressive heat of their tenement apartments by sleeping in the city's parks. And then on the night of October 8th in 1871, the legendary Mrs. O'Leary and a cow was born. The legend of Mrs. O'Leary and a cow was born, and the city of Chicago burned to the ground. Now, I learned about the Chicago fire at a very early age, and I wonder if anyone else is familiar with a ditty that my old man used to chirp to me and my brothers and my sister every now and then. And it went, one dark night when we were all in bed, Mrs. O'Leary hung a lantern in the shed, and when the cow kicked it over, this is what he said, there'll be a hot time in the old town tonight. And that's how I found out about the Chicago fire. 100,000 people were left homeless by that great Chicago fire, and 17,500 buildings were destroyed. And one of them was Mary Jones's dress shop. She had lost everything. She would write decades later that her devotion to labor's cause and to the rights of workers rose from the ashes of that fire. Her time for grieving and reflections upon her life's trauma in Memphis had ended, and her days on the sidelines were over. She would take up the cause of working people and reinvent herself into the character that would make her famous. She became Mother Jones. She focused on the working poor who had no insurance for health care or old age or unemployment as their wages shrunk and work hours increased. She was almost 50 years old in 1877 when she became active with the Knights of Labor. She led scores of strikes after that and was heavily involved in the Haymarket riot in Chicago in May of 1886. It had occurred 3 days after May Day in Chicago's Haymarket Square, and on that May Day, workers had called a national general strike demanding an 8-hour workday. But someone threw a stick or two of dynamite at police officers, and as they were breaking up a pro-labor demonstration. killing 7 cops. The city reacted as though a revolution had begun. Radicals and those thought to be radicals were rounded up, resulting in 8 activists being arrested and convicted in short order, 4 of whom were hanged to death within 6 months. Another committed suicide before he could be brought to the gallows, and the rest received life sentences. The violence at Haymarket convinced Mother Jones that the goals that she sought, justice and equality, required disruption, and that disruption was going to often lead to violence. She had seen it happen in the darkened fields of County Cork and had witnessed it again in the streets of Chicago. Mother Jones was a fervent supporter of the broader union movement, but she had a special place in her heart for those who worked the country's mines and for the kids who were toiling in the clothing sweatshops. Although slavery had been abolished in the 1800s, child slavery was still very much in evidence. Going undercover as a mill worker, she witnessed firsthand as 6-year-olds worked on dangerous looms from 5:30 in the morning until 7 at night, many with missing thumbs and fingers or with mangled hands, while in the mines, trap boys, knee-deep in mud, opened and closed coal chutes for 14 hours a day. "I'll arrange a little publicity," she announced, and she organized the March of the Mill Children. A 3-week trek from Philadelphia to Teddy Roosevelt's estate on Oyster Bay, Long Island, by hundreds of striking child textile workers in 1903, training public attention on the scourge of child labor and energizing efforts to end it. Roosevelt refused to see the remnants of her tattered army of crusaders who carried banners that were reading, "We want to go to school." But the mayor of New York City let her hold two parades there, and tens of thousands came out to see the children and to hear Mother Jones denounce the cannibalistic plutocrats who used the hands and feet of little children to wrench a profit from their wheels of gold. That plaque behind me reads, Mary Harris Jones began the march of the factory children here in Philadelphia in July 1903 to dramatize the need for child labor legislation. Born in Ireland, Jones was an organizer and an inspiring presence in the United States coal, steel, and textile labor movements. So that's just another accolade for her. Okay. Mother Jones worked very hard at organizing the coal fields of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and out west in Colorado. And she found it easy to connect with the young male mine workers that she traversed primitive country roads to support. Few workers faced the conditions and dangers that mine workers experienced on a daily basis back then. Every morning before sunup, they were transported into the bowels of the earth, breathing in foul gases and poisonous dust while collecting the fuel that powered the nation's industrial might. When their workday was finished, they returned to homes owned by a coal company in a town run by a coal company. They died terrible deaths, being buried alive when things went wrong or wasting away before their time with failing lungs. One union official recalled that Mother Jones would, this is a quote, she would take a drink with the boys and speak their language, including some pretty tough stuff that she talked about their bosses, which they might have considered a little fast in an ordinary woman, but not for her. The miners knew her and they respected her. In West Virginia in 1912, she was even tried and convicted on trumped-up charges of conspiracy to commit murder. But public appeals on her behalf convinced the governor to throw away her 20-year sentence. She once told of traveling to help striking miners in Virginia and being greeted by one of them who said to her that her life was in danger. "The superintendent told me that if you come down here, he would personally blow your brains out," the miner warned. "You tell that boyo that I'm not here to see him anyway. I'm here to see the miners." Returning to Colorado, she turned the tragic massacre of miners' wives and children by Colorado's National Guard and the private army of company thugs at John D. Rockefeller's Ludlow, Colorado coal mine into a national crusade. They had locked her up there at the age of 76 without trial or charges for over 3 months on the orders of the governor of Colorado. And weakened after languishing in the rat-infested courthouse jail, she had left the state to recover. But within a week, 2 women and 11 children had been corralled into tents and burned to death at the Ludlow mine. Mother Jones zeroed in on this corporate ignorance and inhumanity for the rest of her life, with the fate of children with no future at the top of her agenda. She involved herself in several industrial job actions on the East Coast in her later years and continued to organize miners well into her early 90s. And she died in 1930 at the tender age of 93. And I want to finish with the lyrics of a poem recited to the West Virginia Federation of Labor sometime between 1917 and 1920. The patriotic soldiers come marching down the pike, prepared to shoot and slaughter in the Colorado strike. With whiskey in their bellies and vengeance in their souls, they prayed that God would help them shoot the miners full of holes. In front of these brave soldiers loomed a sight you seldom see, a white-haired rebel woman at the age of 83. "Charge!" cried the valiant captain in his awful thunder tones, and the patriotic soldiers charged and captured Mother Jones. Now 'tis great to be a soldier with a musket in your hand, ready for any bloody work the lords of earth demand. 'Tis great to shoot a miner and to hear his dying groans, but there never was such glory as that charge of Mother Jones. So, that's it. Just make sure you grab one of these on the way to the door.
Okay, good stuff, Pat. Something that I can pass on. People of my generation in political persuasion could remember back in the 70s and 80s a magazine that was out called Mother Jones. Sure. It still exists online. I happened to look it up when Pat decided he was going to do this, and it's very well done and a professional looking thing if you want to read some left of center stuff. Our last speaker tonight is Marie McGee. She's going to speak on yet another Irish woman. Marie is a member of the Irish community, is how she describes herself. And we up here in Northern Rhode Island, I guess, are very lucky that she moved up here a year or so ago and brought with her some remarkable enthusiasm. Marie has been running point on the Brexit lobbying thing and has written and organized all sorts of letter writing campaigns, and it's just a great access to this community. She's also with the Ben Sisters mainstay here at the club, changed the culture in some ways downstairs, and it's very, very nice. And Marie, like the person she's going to speak about, is a tireless fighter for social justice and is a serious worker at the Crossroads for the homeless. And so here's Marie to speak on Bernadette Devlin.
I don't want anybody to get me wrong, but occasionally I'm going to be giving the finger to Maureen over there. Because I didn't print another sheet for her to do slides. So, go ahead, the first one. Devlin was born, Bernadette Devlin was born in Cookstown, County Tyrone, to a Catholic family. She attended St. Patrick's Girls Academy in Dungannon. She was studying psychology at Queen's University Belfast in 1968 when she took a prominent role in a student-led civil rights organization. People's Democracy was founded on October 9th, 1968, at a meeting held in the Queen's University Belfast Debating Hall. A catalyst for its foundation had been the attack on a Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, fourth slide. Whoop. Okay. The march was marred by police brutality. The day's events were a defining moment in Northern Ireland's descent into the Troubles, and many consider them to be the spark that lit a fire that burned for almost 30 years. Devlin was subsequently excluded from the university. Elected to the Parliament in 1969, she remained the youngest woman ever elected to Westminster until May 2015, when 20-year-old Mahari Black broke her record. Bernadette stood on the slogan, "I will take my seat and fight for your rights." It was a habit of many of the politicians that they would get elected, but then they just wouldn't participate in their party's business. But she planned on participating. On March 22nd, 1969, the day before her 22nd birthday, she swore the oath of allegiance and made her maiden speech within an hour. A very large riot that took place from August 12th to August 14th, 1969, in Derry, Northern Ireland. The fighting was between residents of the Bogside area, organized under Derry Citizens Defense Association, and the Royal Ulster Constabulary, along with local unionists. The rioting erupted at the end of an apprentice boys' parade, which was passing along the city walls, past the Catholic Bogside. The riot, which sparked widespread violence in Northern Ireland, is commonly seen as one of the first major confrontations in the conflict known as the Troubles. After engaging on the side of the residents in this battle, Bernadette was convicted of incitement to riot in December '69, for which she served a short jail term. After being re-elected in the 1970 general election, Devlin declared that she would sit in Parliament as an independent. Bloody Sunday was an incident on January 30th, 1972, in the Bogside area of Derry, Northern Ireland, when British soldiers shot 28 unarmed civilians during a protest march against internment. 14 people died. 13 were killed outright, while the death of another man 4 months later was attributed to his injuries. Many of the victims were shot while fleeing from the soldiers, and some were shot while trying to help the wounded. Other protesters were injured by rubber bullets or batons, and 2 were run down by army vehicles. All of those shot were Catholics. The march had been organized by the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association. The soldiers were from the 1st Battalion Parachute Regiment. This battalion was involved in 2 other controversial shootings, the Ballymurphy massacre several months before, and the killing of Protestant civilians in the Shankill several months later. Having witnessed the events of Bloody Sunday, Devlin was infuriated that the next day she was denied the floor in the House of Commons by the Speaker, Susan Lloyd, despite the fact that Parliamentary Convention decreed that any MP witnessing an incident under discussion would be granted an opportunity to speak about it. Conservative Home Secretary Reginald Maulding incorrectly asserted in the House of Commons that the paratroopers had fired in self-defense on Bloody Sunday. Devlin got up and slapped him across the face. And now we have a little YouTube, a short YouTube.
Devlin, what exactly provoked your actions on today?
The fact that 13 people were murdered by the paratroopers in Derry yesterday. The British Home Secretary got up and made what he called a statement. It did not have one substantiated fact in it. It lasted 3 minutes, and at no stage did he even say, "I regret the fact that 13 people are dead."
This was an emotional reaction of your end.
it wasn't an emotional reaction, it was quite coldly and calmly done. I was the only member of Parliament who was in the chamber, who was in Derry yesterday. I was fired on by the paratroopers, and yet parliamentary democracy was such that I was not allowed to speak.
But what do you think you would achieve by that action if you also thought to do?
What I achieved was simply delivering to the Home Secretary a simple proletarian protest, the fact that he was responsible for the murder of 13 people. And as far as I'm concerned, that was simply a token effort.
Do you really think this was the proper way in which to make our protest?
What do you want me to do?
An unladylike and an undemocratic way to deal with it.
Unladylike. There is a young girl whose body was carried out of the bogside this morning. She was shot in the back by the paratroopers. They didn't ask her if she was a lady. Undemocratic. I've already said I was the only person who was there. I was not even allowed to ask a simple question. Undemocratic. 13 unarmed civilians were shot in the back by a murdering group of thugs with the tacit support of the Home Secretary and no doubt the orders of the Minister.
Bernadette helped to form the Irish Republican Socialist Party with Seamus Costello in 1974. This was a revolutionary socialist breakaway from official Sinn Féin and paralleled the Irish National Liberation Army's split from the official Irish Republican Army. She served on the party's national executive in 1975, but resigned later on. In 1977, she joined the Independent Socialist Party, but it disbanded the following year. Bernadette Devlin ran as an independent candidate in support of the prisoners of the blanket protest and dirty protest at Long Kesh Prison. In the 1979 elections to the European Parliament in Northern Ireland constituency and won 5.9% of the vote. She was a leading spokesperson for the Smash H Block campaign, which supported the hunger strikes in 1980 and in 1981. On 16th of January 1981, she and her husband, Michael McAlliskey, were shot by members of the Ulster Freedom Fighters, who broke into their home near Coisland, County Tyrone. The gunman shot Devlin 9 times in front of her children. British soldiers were watching the McAlliskey home at the time, but failed to prevent the assassination attempt. It has been claimed that Devlin's assassination was ordered by British authorities and that collusion was a factor. An army patrol of the 3rd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, entered the house and waited for a half hour. Devlin has claimed that they were waiting for the couple to die. Bernadette and, in 1969, now this is going to be the next 4, just at your own pace, okay? In 1989, John Goldschmidt, a director and producer, made the documentary film Bernadette Devlin for ATV, which was shown on ITV and on CBS 60 Minutes. And you can watch it on YouTube. I did. It's like, it was like a 40-minute interview with Harry Reisner. It was excellent. And this included footage of Devlin during the Battle of Bogside. Another documentary, Bernadette, Notes on a Political Journey, directed by Leila Doolin, was released in 2011. At the 2008 Cannes Film Festival, a biop of Devlin was announced, but she stated that the whole concept is abhorrent to me, and the film was not made. Okay, next. 2. Bernadette and Michael's daughter, Rosen, was arrested while 4 months pregnant in 1996 on an extradition warrant issued by Germany, accusing her of involvement in the Ornsbrook mortar attack against a British Army compound at Ornsbrook. on January 2nd, 1998, a magistrate cleared her extradition to Germany after a long and prominent campaign in which her mother took the leading role, supported by many influential citizens, including politicians from the Republic of Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. British Home Secretary Jack Straw vetoed the extradition on health grounds. She eventually gave birth to a healthy daughter, Lenore, in England. Bernadette currently coordinates a not-for-profit community development organization based in Dungannon, the South Tyrone Empowerment Program. Established in 1997, this is a non-profit, rights-based community development organization based in Dungannon, Northern Ireland. The range of services has continually diversified in response to changing community needs and gaps in service provision. They have grown to include both local and regional services to the community, including frontline and specialist advice in areas of housing, immigration, employment, welfare, and debt. Their ethos is to center on the empowerment of groups and individuals to participate in the social economic life of their community. Now I'm going to ask if anybody has any more information about her that they want to share, because this is an amazing woman and I did some research, but I think I'm missing something about her life. So if anybody has any other things to share. Don?
What I would say is that on October 5th of 1969, I was a freshman in college, and I happened to be living in Paris at the time as a student. And in the evenings, we were able to get RTE. Not very well, but you could understand what was going on. And you're absolutely right that the attack on the civil rights marchers in Derry on October 5th was described in great detail that evening on RTE. And you're absolutely right in saying that that attack was the genesis of the civil rights movement in the North. And I remember it very well, just as much as I do, of course, Bloody Sunday, as many of us do in 1972. But I think you're right on the money. I wouldn't change a thing, frankly.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I believe it was around 1969. She came to Rhode Island.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, she was here in Rhode Island campaigning to raise funds, and she came to the Blarneystone Pub, which was owned by the Maddens and the Carrolls, and spoke to the group and collected. And I got to meet her.
Oh, wow, that's great. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Slide 19.
One other thing that I can add about that, I remember the night at the Blarneystone, but I think it was 2 years later, it must be 1971, my sister Mavis and myself saw her at Brown University. And it was a tour that she was sponsored by the AOH. And she traveled through the Northeast and spoke at different colleges and universities. And many people here, some people here probably remember Al McAloon.
Yep.
And he was the Rhode Island person who brought Bernadette to Brown and then back to Newport to the Hibernian Hall. And I didn't realize this at the time because I just was at the lecture, but later on when I got together with him, all she wanted to do was meet Black Panthers. She had no interest in going there. She was a true revolutionary, a socialist, and I mean that's who she identified with, as opposed to the well-heeled Irish people that were kind of catering around. All right, but just some business, if you don't mind. There's a raffle going on back there that you're probably aware of, and just to make it clear, every month we have this raffle, and the proceeds pay for the music that's downstairs. So after we leave here, we go downstairs. The Crackers Mighty, Sean Connell is down there tonight, and without the raffle, we wouldn't be able to have that kind of social activity downstairs. A second thing is tomorrow night, Frankie Galvin is playing in the hall here. world-class Irish all-time great fiddler. It's a magnificent show if you can come and see it. The doors open at 6:30. The music starts at 7:30. It's $25, $20 for members. It'll be a night, well to remember and everything. And then, lastly, the 1916 committee. We usually have these lectures the last Friday of every month. However, we changed that in November and December because of the holidays at the end. So we're actually going to have another lecture on November 8th. That's in 2 weeks, I guess, or maybe 1 week. But we are very fortunate that Scott Malloy has volunteered to do a lecture. It's a big topic. He's a big speaker. He's got things to pass out and everything. You don't want to miss. Scott puts on a show, I'll tell you that. And so that is November 8th, Friday night, right here. And then the first Friday in December, we'll be doing it again with something else. But for right now, if you're not on the 1916 email list, please see me downstairs or after, and I'll make sure you get all the updates, okay? Is that it? Anything else here that I should mention? Or a great job by our 3 speakers, very educational, 3 great women we talked about. All right.